Let me tell you something right from the jump. Whenever people talk about power, they always look west. They always say, oh, this country's got this, or that country's got that. Like the only folks building something extraordinary are sitting somewhere with a Starbucks on every corner. But every once in a while, God taps a part of this world and says, y'all go ahead and surprise them. And that's when a nation rises up and starts putting together ideas so sharp, so bold, so ahead of the game that even the biggest powers on the planet sit back like, hold up, where did that come from? Now, today we're talking about something that turns heads, raises eyebrows, and makes even the strongest military minds whisper, they did what? We're talking about Indian weapons, 10 of them, that are so advanced, so brilliant, so unexpected, that even nations used to being on top of the tech charts find themselves taking notes. And before anybody gets nervous, this ain't about war. This ain't about conflict. This is about possibility. This is about what a country can do when it refuses to stay small, refuses to stay quiet, and starts believing in the power of its own mind. Because when I looked at these inventions, these systems, these machines, these works of pure genius, I didn't just see weapons. I saw dreams that somebody refused to let die. I saw long nights in laboratories, young engineers with backpacks full of ideas, scientists with eyes so passionate they could burn through steel. And every single one of them was fueled by that one line we all hear growing up, but only a few of us decide to take seriously. You can do anything. So buckle up, because we're going to walk through these 10 marvels one by one, and I'm going to tell you exactly why they matter, not just to the world, but to anybody trying to climb higher in their own life. You might think this is a list of defense tech, but by the time we finish, you're going to realize it's a list of life lessons disguised as hardware. Now let's get into the first one. You ever see something move so fast that you question whether your eyes malfunctioned? That's what happens the first time you witness the BrahMos missile in action. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine standing on the shore, watching the water, calm and peaceful. And then suddenly something shoots across the sky so fast, if you blink once you miss the whole event. That's BrahMos, fastest cruise missile on Earth. Mach 3. That's 3 times the speed of sound. Some countries are still trying to figure out Mach 1. Meanwhile, this thing is out here living in Mach 3 like it's casual. People talk about speed all the time, careers, success, dreams. But this missile is physical proof that if you decide to leave people behind, you can leave them WY behind. And let me tell you, nations that thought they were ahead had to go back to their drawing board, scratching their heads. How did they? When did they? Wait, run that test again. That's the sound of surprise. That's the sound of respect. And respect is earned when you deliver something nobody expects from you. Then we move on to the Tejas fighter jet. Now listen, most folks imagine fighter jets as these bulky metallic birds screaming across the sky. But Tejas is like that quiet kid in class who never says anything. Until exam day, when he scores higher than everybody. This thing is light, agile, and engineered so precisely that pilots call it a dream. Countries with massive air forces are watching this little jet dance in drills like, who taught it that? It's the perfect example of thinking smart instead of thinking big. See, life will have you believing you need to be heavy to be strong, that you need to be huge to be powerful. But this jet says, I'm light and dangerous, I'm small and mighty, I don't need bulk when I've got brains. And let me tell you, the world respects a machine that can turn on a dime and still hit the target. Now let's talk about INS Arihant. Woo, this one right here. This is the submarine equivalent of a poker player with the best cards in the deck, but keeps a straight face. Nuclear, powered, nuclear-armed, quiet as a whisper, moves under the ocean like it's gliding through silk. You can't see it, You can't hear it. You won't even know it's there until it wants to be known. And that level of stealth, that level of intelligence in engineering, that's when people start saying, okay, India ain't playing. But here's the real message. Some of your greatest strengths will never be visible to the world. Sometimes your real power is quiet, developed in the dark, beneath the surface, away from applause. And when the time comes, it rises. That submarine is a lesson. Not everything powerful needs to announce itself. And speaking of things rising, have you seen the Agni V missile? Long range, precise, unstoppable. This is the one that makes global analysts put their glasses down and recheck the numbers. Is that accurate? Are they sure? Oh, it's accurate. India built a missile that can practically whisper into another continent's ear. But what fascinates me isn't the range, it's the confidence. When a nation builds something like that, they're saying, we're here, we're capable, and we believe in our abilities. That's what separates dreamers from achievers. Belief. You can't build an Agni V without belief so strong it scares even your competition. Now let me switch gears for a second and talk about something breathtaking. The HL-12 helicopter. This thing doesn't just fly. It adapts. High altitudes, no problem. Rescue missions, it's on it. Tough weather, it shrugs. It's like the Swiss Army knife of helicopters. You know what the world said when they saw it. Hold up, India can do that too. Yes, they can, and they did. What this machine teaches you is versatility. Life will throw you into mountains, storms, valleys, highs, lows. You gotta be the kind of person that can handle all of it. Be the helicopter that doesn't complain about the terrain, just says, tell me where to go. Now let's talk about something that almost feels unfair because of how smart it is. The Akash missile defense system. This thing detects, tracks, and destroys incoming threats like they're toys. You throw something at it, and it says, nope, not today. The field experts looked at the price to performance ratio and said, wait, how is it this efficient and this affordable? That's what happens when innovation meets determination. And here's the life message. Protect your space, protect your dreams, protect your peace. You don't need to respond to every negative force in your life. Just build a solid defense. Let your systems handle the nonsense. Next up is the Pinaka rocket system. Fast, fierce, and capable of blanketing a huge area in seconds. When the world saw this, they said, okay, India's not just making things, they're mastering them. This weapon is named after the bow of a god, and let me tell you, the strength lives up to the legacy. When Pinaka fires, it's not just a rocket. It's a reminder that ancient civilizations with legendary stories still have descendants capable of legendary engineering. And what's the lesson? Legacy matters. Where you come from matters. You don't have to forget your roots to reach the top. Now let me move to something sleek, deadly, and beautifully engineered, the energy anti-tank missile. This thing hunts its target. Heat, seeking, precise, merciless. The tank can run, but it can't hide. Countries that have been making anti-tank missiles for decades saw this one and said, well, okay, that's impressive. That's the power of refinement. It's not always about being the first. Sometimes it's about being the one who gets it right. Then we've got the Arihant's underwater companion, the Varanastra torpedo. This underwater missile is so advanced that even major navies looked at the specs like, wait a minute, this came from where? It's fast underwater. Now listen, water slows everything down. It resists everything. But this torpedo slices through it like it's cutting through warm butter. That's the result of pure, relentless dedication. And then there's the last one of my favorites. The Rustam and its successors, India's line of unmanned aerial vehicles. These drones don't just fly, they observe, they analyze, they assist. They gather information that saves lives. They're like eyes in the sky, powered by intelligence on the ground. And a lot of countries, big ones, rich ones, ones with long histories in tech, they took a step back when they saw how capable these UAV were. Because capability isn't about budget, it's about vision. Now I told you this wasn't just about weapons, and I meant that. Because when you look at each of these 10 creations, these masterpieces of engineering, you're looking at 10 reminders of what's possible when people stop apologizing for their ambition. Everybody doubts you when you start out. You say you want to do something big, and the world says, why you? India heard that for decades. Why you? How you? Can you? And they answered every question with results. You're gonna have people laugh at you. You're gonna have people underestimate you. You're gonna have people say, nobody like you has done this before. And you gotta look back at them the same way these engineers looked at a world full of doubters and say, watch me. Look at the pattern behind these inventions. Not one of them was created overnight. Not one of them was built without failure. Not one of them succeeded without vision, and that's the message for you. You want something big. You want something legendary. You want something that makes people say, I didn't see that coming. Then you gotta be willing to do what other folks ain't willing to do. You gotta stay in the lab longer. You gotta keep building even when the first version crashes. You gotta believe even when the world says your belief is foolish. Every single one of these weapons shocked the world not because they exist, but because nobody expected them to exist. And that's exactly how you need to live your life. Be unexpected, be undeniable, be unshakable, be the result nobody saw coming. Because let me tell you, there is no greater feeling than proving a doubter wrong. Not with arguments, not with explanations, but with achievement. India could have accepted being overlooked. Instead, they decided to be outstanding. India could have accepted the role people assigned them. Instead, they rewrote the story, and that's what you need to do. Rewrite your story, stop letting other people define your limits. They don't know the fire inside you. They don't know the nights you've cried, prayed, worked, sacrificed. They don't know the power you've been hiding beneath the surface like a submarine waiting for the right moment. You know what the U.S. felt when they looked at some of these weapons. Respect. Respect earned by brilliance. And if a nation can do that, then so can you in your own world. Maybe you're building a business. Maybe you're chasing a dream. Maybe you're trying to break a cycle in your family. Maybe you're trying to rise above a past that tried to bury you. Whatever it is, make it your Brahmos. Make it your Agni. Make it the thing people look at and say, how did you do that? Because the truth is, greatness isn't owned by anyone. It's available for anyone. It belongs to the ones who show up, believe harder, and push longer. If you learn anything from these 10 weapons, it should be this. Capability comes from persistence. Power comes from discipline. Respect comes from results. And shock comes from exceeding expectations. So go shock somebody, shock the people who ignored you, shock the people who laughed at you, shock the people who doubted you, shock the people who said you'd never make it, shock the world if you have to. And when you finally succeed, when you finally rise, when you finally build your masterpiece, do me a favor, don't stop. Because greatness is not a moment, it's a practice. You keep going, you keep rising. You keep creating, just like the brilliant minds we talked about today. Let the world watch, let them learn, let them wonder. But most of all, let them be shocked. The world's surprise highlights how determination rewrites international expectations. When you look at the story behind that idea, you start to understand something much bigger than geopolitics, defense technology, or the rise of a nation. You begin to see how the world forms its assumptions, how those assumptions harden into beliefs, and how a single force, unyielding determination, can shatter them like thin glass. Determination is not loud. It is not glamorous. It is not celebrated when it begins. It works in silence, builds in patience, and transforms in persistence. And when results finally arrive, they don't just change a situation. They rewrite what the world thought was possible. When nations or people are underestimated, the world assumes that they will stay in that position forever. Expectations become boxes, boxes become limits, limits become labels, and those labels can stick for decades until someone, somewhere, decides they are done living under them. Countries rise the same way people do, through a long process of believing they deserve more, refusing to stay behind, and slowly pushing past every barrier placed in front of them. International expectations are not objective truths. They are simply predictions based on past patterns. And predictions get shattered the moment someone chooses a new path. When a nation once considered developing or slow, moving suddenly unveils technology so advanced that global powers freeze in disbelief, that moment is not born from accident. It comes from years of grit unnoticed by the world. It comes from thousands of minds working late hours. It comes from leaders choosing investment over convenience. It comes from a collective decision to stop waiting for validation from others and start building self-respect from within. The surprise the world shows is not really about the technology itself. It is about the fact that the technology came from a place they did not expect. The shock is a mirror showing their old assumptions crumbling. Determination forces the world to update its understanding. It forces analysts, strategists, media outlets, and other nations to say, we have to reevaluate what we thought we knew. That reevaluation is power. That shift in perception is influence, and that influence was earned through nothing but focused persistence. Determination has a way of accumulating quietly. A country may spend decades investing in education, research, laboratories, and indigenous innovation. Every advancement, every breakthrough, every small victory builds upon the last, but the world rarely pays attention to the process. The global stage only reacts when the final product is unveiled. By then, the determination has already done its work. It has already forged the unexpected result. It has already rewritten the narrative. Think about how expectations are formed. The world tends to judge based on history. If a nation has long been recognized for poverty, colonial impact, or dependency, the international community stores that image like a snapshot frozen in time. They assume progress must be slow and predictable. The shock comes when the progress is not slow and the result is not predictable. Determination broke the pattern long before the world noticed, but the unveiling is the moment when the world is forced to acknowledge the transformation. Rewriting expectations is not simply about proving people wrong. It is about establishing a new identity. When a country demonstrates capabilities that rival or surpass long established military or technological powers, the world begins to adjust its understanding of that nation's potential. This shift influences diplomacy, partnerships, regional balance, and global strategy. It changes how other nations treat you, how they negotiate with you, and how seriously they take your ambitions. Determination gives birth to dignity on the world stage. The surprise the world feels is an external reaction. The determination that caused it is an internal evolution. Internal evolution is always more powerful, because when a nation believes in its own capabilities, it doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't expect help. It doesn't depend on validation. It becomes self-driven. Determination turns identity from something inherited into something engineered. A nation becomes what it decides to build. When you break expectations, you are not just changing global perceptions. You are changing the confidence of your own people. Young minds growing up in the country start seeing possibility differently. They begin to realize that their homeland is not defined by limitations but by potential. Determination spreads. It becomes cultural. It becomes generational. It becomes a force greater than any individual innovation. But determination always begins with rejection, with being overlooked, with being underestimated. When you are constantly told you can't, that can't either becomes your cage or your fuel. For nations that choose for it to become fuel, determination becomes unstoppable. And when determination becomes unstoppable, results become undeniable. Rewriting expectations is not a moment. It is a transformation built brick by brick. Every successful project, every indigenous system, every unique design is another brick laid by engineers, scientists, strategists, and leaders who refused to accept the narrative the world handed them. They created a new narrative, they earned it, and the world's surprise is simply the sound of old narratives collapsing. Consider how global analysts react when a nation once seen as a follower suddenly becomes an innovator. They start comparing charts, reviewing satellite images, analyzing test data. They don't trust the reports at first. They assume there must be foreign involvement, external assistance, or exaggerated claims. That disbelief is not intentional disrespect. It is the inertia of old expectations refusing to die. But as the evidence piles up, the disbelief fades. Recognition starts flowing. Respect begins growing. And expectations permanently shift. Determination doesn't just challenge expectations. It erases the boundary between who is considered advanced and who is considered developing. When determination is strong enough, categories blur. Hierarchies weaken. The world begins to understand that innovation is not geographically restricted. Talent is not owned by any one country. Future breakthroughs can come from anywhere determination thrives. When determined nations create something exceptional, it forces others to humble themselves and learn. Even powerful countries accustomed to leading innovation start studying how a rising nation achieved such rapid progress. That moment is a silent victory. Determination has not only broken expectations, it has reversed them. Instead of being a student of the world, the nation becomes a teacher. Rewriting expectations is not just about technology, it is about symbolism. The symbol of a country that stands tall after centuries of struggle, rebuilding, reinvention, and resilience. A country that refuses to allow past limitations to define future possibilities. A country that keeps moving forward regardless of hurdles. Determination is the bridge between what a nation was and what a nation chooses to become. The surprise the world expresses also exposes the truth about privilege in the global order. Some nations expect themselves to lead and expect others to follow. But determination democratizes dominance. When a rising nation demonstrates brilliance, it forces the world to recognize the universality of potential. That recognition disrupts old assumptions about who is destined to lead and who is destined to trail behind. Determination declares that destiny is not inherited, it is earned. Breaking expectations is not just about surpassing others, it is about surpassing your own perceived limits. Determination pushes individuals and nations alike into territories they never imagined they could reach. When engineers push themselves to design something the world thought impossible, they experience their own evolution. They realize they are capable of more. And once you discover your true capacity, you never shrink back to your old size. International expectations tend to be slow to evolve. They lag behind reality. By the time the world notices a nation's determination, the transformation has already been happening for decades. The world is reacting to a chapter that is already written and published. That's the real power of determination. It works without applause, without headlines, without recognition, until the results are too big to ignore. The shock from global powers is a reminder that strength is not always visible as it develops. Sometimes the most powerful growth happens in silence, in research centers, in remote test fields, in quiet offices where visionaries sketch the impossible. Determination grows strongest when it is doubted the most. Rewriting expectations is also a story about patience. Nations don't transform overnight. They grow step by step, project by project, generation by generation. Determination is the force that keeps a nation steady when progress feels slow. It is the force that tells scientists, keep working. It is the force that tells leaders, invest again. It is the force that tells citizens, believe in your country. And when all those forces align, international expectations crumble. The world's surprise is also a message to future generations. It tells them that no matter what the world thinks of them today, they have the power to change that perception tomorrow. Expectations are external. Determination is internal, and the internal always overpowers the external when applied consistently. When a nation's determination rewrites expectations, it also alters geopolitical balance. Nations previously seen as dependent become indispensable. Nations once treated as secondary become strategic. Nations once ignored become influential. Determination shifts alliances, reshapes partnerships, and redefines global conversations. It forces the world to listen. Determination also creates a new psychological landscape. When a nation realizes it can exceed expectations once, it begins to believe it can exceed them again and again. This cycle creates continuous progress. Success becomes a habit. Innovation becomes a mindset. The nation begins to expect excellence from itself. That internal expectation is far more powerful than anything the world can impose. The surprise of the world also reveals how quickly global perceptions can change when a nation refuses to remain stationary. Determined nations don't wait for the world to give them opportunities. They create opportunities. They don't wait for validation. They build achievements. They don't wait for acknowledgement. They produce results that demand acknowledgement. Determination makes a nation unpredictable in the best way. When a nation has a record of surprising the world begins paying close attention because they know anything can happen next. That unpredictability itself becomes a form of strength. It gives a nation leverage. Influence, gravity. The world cannot ignore a nation that repeatedly defies expectations. The world's surprise is a reflection of its own outdated assumptions. Determination is the force that replaces those assumptions with respect. Respect is not requested, it is earned. It is earned through consistency, resilience, and relentless pursuit of growth. And once earned, it cannot be taken away easily. Determination erases the phrase out of reach. It replaces it with not yet achieved. That shift in mindset is the foundation of rewriting expectations. When challenges appear, determined nations don't ask, "Can we do this?" They ask, "How soon can we do this?" That kind of thinking changes everything. And every time the world is shocked, it pushes that nation to go even further. Surprise becomes motivation. Motivation becomes momentum. Momentum becomes mastery, and mastery becomes legacy. The world's surprise highlights how determination rewrites international expectations.